Buy me, Cowboy. Experienced, and I can give you offspring, whispered the desperate Apache woman. The auction block in Dusty Fork smelled like sweat, leather, and broken lives. Cole Hardin had not planned to stop. He was 3 days out from Santa Fe, headed north with 60 head of cattle and a debt that followed him like a shadow. He had stopped for water. He had stayed for reasons he could not yet name. The square was packed. Settlers, ranchers, buffalo hunters, drifters, all gathered in a loose and ugly circle around a raised wooden platform that the town had built for grain sales and now used for this. Cole stood at the edge of the crowd and watched a man named Orville Cass pace the boards in his yellow coat, calling out bids in a voice that could cut glass. There were 3 people on the platform. An old man who sat with his chin on his chest. A boy, maybe 14, who stared at the ground like the ground owed him an apology. And then she stood apart from the other 2. Not because anyone had placed her apart, but because something in the way she held herself created distance. She was Apache. That much was plain from the cut of her cheekbones and the darkness of her eyes. Her dress was torn at one shoulder and mended badly with a strip of brown cloth. Her wrists were bound in front of her with rope that had rubbed the skin raw, but her chin was up. Her eyes were moving across the crowd the way a hawk moves its eyes across an open field, measuring, calculating, missing nothing. Cole had seen that look before. She had seen it on men who had decided they were not going to die today, no matter what it cost them. Orville Cass was talking about the old man now, listing what he could do, how much land he had worked before his luck ran out, what he was worth on a spread. The crowd made small sounds. A few hands went up. Cole was not listening to Cass. He was watching the woman. She found him watching, and she did not look away. That was the moment most people looked away. She did not. When Cass moved to the boy, the woman turned her head slightly and said something to the boy in a low voice. The boy's shoulders dropped a fraction, like he had been holding something tight and she had told him he could put it down for just a moment. Whatever she said, it helped him. Cole did not know what language she used. He did not need to. He pushed through the crowd toward the platform. The bid on the boy was climbing. A cattle rancher named Dutch Hollis was bidding against a man in a black hat who looked like he collected things he had no right to own. Colt watched Hollis win the boy and felt one knot loosen in his chest. Then Cass turned to the woman. The square went quiet in a different way. Not the focused quiet of men doing math in their heads. Something murkier. Cass began his description. He listed her age, which he guessed at somewhere between 20 and 30. He listed what she could do around a house. He listed things that made Cole's jaw tighten until his back teeth ached. The men in the crowd began to shift in ways that told Cole everything about what some of them intended. The bidding started low and ugly. Cole had $240 in his saddlebag. It was every cent he owned. He needed it to pay down the debt on his land. Or he would lose the cattle range his father had worked 30 years to build. He stood there doing the arithmetic of a man about to do something he knows is costly and cannot stop himself from doing anyway. The bids climbed. And then the woman turned her head and found him in the crowd again. She had been scanning every face, and she had come back to his. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she leaned forward as far as her bound wrists would allow, and she said something. Her voice was low and direct, cutting through the crowd noise just enough for him to catch it. Buy me, Cowboy. I am experienced, and I can give you offspring. The words were practical. They were not a plea. They were an offer, the only currency she had left. Laid on the table with both hands, nothing hidden, nothing dressed up. She was not begging. She was negotiating with whatever she had left to negotiate with. The man in the black hat raised his bid again. Cole raised his hand. He did not know, standing there in the dust of Dusty Fork, that the next 14 days would rewrite everything he thought he understood about loyalty, survival. What a person owes a stranger, and what kind of man he actually was when the comfortable choices ran out. He just raised his hand, and she watched him do it. The bidding went 3 more rounds before the man in the black hat finally dropped his chin and stepped back. Cole Hardin paid $190 for the release of a woman whose name he did not yet know. He had $50 left. It was not enough to cover his debt, but he could worry about that later. Or he could worry about it now, and it would change nothing either way. Cass's man came down with the key and unlocked the rope from her wrists. She did not rub them, or look at the rope, or give the man who had held it any part of her attention. She stepped off the platform and came to stand in front of Cole. She was taller than he had estimated from a distance. She looked at him the way a person looks at a contract they are about to sign and want to read one more time. "My name is Nara," she said. Her English was clear and without decoration. "Cole Harden," he said. He did not extend his hand and she did not move toward one. "You have, Kettle," she said. It was not a question. She had seen his boots, read the calluses on his hands, noticed the particular kind of tiredness that comes from long drives and short sleep. 60 head, he said. Headed north. She nodded once. "Where is your camp?" he told her. She walked ahead of him out of the square, without waiting to see if he would follow, which he did, because she was moving in exactly the right direction. His camp was a quarter-mile east of town, where a stand of cottonwoods grew along a thin creek. His horse, a big roan named Fig, lifted his head when they approached and watched Nara with calm interest. She stopped a few feet from Fig and let the horse come to its own conclusions about her, which Fig did after about 30 seconds, dropping his nose back to the grass. Cole built up the fire that had burned down to coals. He put water on. He did not know what to say, and so he said nothing, which turned out to be the right choice. Nara sat on a flat rock near the fire and examined her wrists. The rope had left marks that were going to turn to bruises before they healed. She pulled a strip of cloth from somewhere inside her dress and wrapped both wrists, without drama. "How long were you held?" Cole asked. 11 days, she said. He handed her a cup of water. She drank it and handed the cup back, and he filled it again. She told him what she chose to tell him, and left out the rest, which was more than most people manage under easier circumstances. She had been traveling south from her people's camp in the San Pedro range, carrying a message to a settlement where a half Apache man named Pedro kept a trading post, and sometimes passed word between communities that had no other way to speak to each other. 3 men had found her on the trail. The details of the 11 days she compressed into 4 words. "They sold me on." 4 words that held a freight of meaning Cole chose not to press on. In return, she asked him 3 questions. Was he married? He said no. Did he owe money to anyone in the territory who might come looking for him? He paused, then said, "Not the kind that comes looking with guns." She accepted this. 3rd question, "Where are you going after the cattle are delivered?" "Back to my land," he said. "It is in the foothills above the Rio Hondo. Small operation, about 300 acres of graze." She looked into the fire. After a moment, she said, "I cannot go back north yet. I have to get word to Pedro first, or the message I was carrying dies with the journey." Cole poured himself coffee. "How far is Pedro's trading post?" 4 days east, maybe 5. She looked at him. "I am not asking you to take me." He drank his coffee. The cattle were penned in a lot just outside of town with his hired hand, a quiet Tejano named Rufus, who never asked questions, which was a quality Cole valued almost as much as honesty. After a while he said, "My cattle drive goes east before it turns north. Rufus can handle the herd for a day or 2 while I ride ahead." She was quiet. He said, "I spent $190 on something I do not regret spending it on. But I would not mind knowing the investment is not going to get itself killed in the first week." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. It was not quite a smile, but it was in the same neighborhood, she said. "The men who sold me, I know where they are camped." Cole set down his cup. She said, "They have 11 days of things that belong to other people. I would like some of it back before we ride east." Cole looked at her. He looked at Fig. He looked at the fire. 3 men, he said. 3, she confirmed. He stood up and checked the load in his rifle in the particular careful way of a man who has done it enough times that it does not look like checking. He settled his hat. He said, "Show me the direction." She stood. They walked into the dark together. This woman who had offered everything she had left to a stranger on an auction block. And this man who had spent his last practical dollars on a choice. His father would have called foolish, and his mother would have understood completely. The campfire of the 3 men was visible a half-mile south, a stupid orange glow against the black hills. The fire of people who did not expect anyone to come looking. They were wrong about that. The three men had made camp in a shallow draw between two sandstone ridges, which would have been a smart choice if they had posted a watch. They had not. Their horses were tied to a line between two scrub oaks. A lantern hung from a hook on one of the saddles and pushed weak yellow light out into the draw. Cole counted 3 bedrolls, 2 of which were occupied. The third man sat on a log with a bottle, facing away from the direction Cole and Nara had come from. Nara crouched beside Cole behind a low boulder and studied the camp for a long moment. She was utterly still in the way that animals are still before they move. Not rigid, just completely present. "The one with the bottle is named Decker," she said at a volume. Just above silence, "The heavy one sleeping nearest the horses took my mother's medicine bundle. The third one has the letters I was carrying." Cole noted each position. "Where are the letters?" "Inside his coat. He does not take it off." They separated at the edge of the draw. Cole went right toward the horses, because a spooked horse is noise, and noise wakes sleeping men, and he wanted the horses calm before anything else happened. Nara went left along the ridge with a silence that made Cole feel loud by comparison. Decker, the man with the bottle, was still working through whatever story. He was telling himself about his own life. When Cole stepped into the edge of the lantern light, with his rifle up, Decker turned and looked at the rifle, and then at Cole, and then at the rifle again. "Do not," Cole said, "make noise." Decker did not make noise. He set the bottle down with careful precision, the way a man sets down the one thing he does not want to lose. The 2 sleeping men had started to surface at the sound of Cole's boots, the unconscious alertness of men who have spent time in rough country. The heavy one sat up and reached for something near his bedroll. He stopped reaching when he found Nara, standing 2 feet from him, with a knife that caught the lantern light. The third man was very still. Cole kept his rifle level and walked into the camp. He said to Nara, "Is there a rope?" There was a rope. There were, in fact, 3 ropes, which was convenient. Within 15 minutes, all 3 men were sitting with their backs to the scrub oak, tied in a fashion that owed nothing to gentleness. Nara moved through their gear with focused efficiency. She retrieved her mother's medicine bundle from inside the heavy man's saddlebag, checking its contents with 2 fingers before tucking it inside her dress. She found the letters in the coat of the third man and examined each page in the lantern light with the careful attention of someone who has been trusted to carry something important and wants to be sure it is all still there. She also found, distributed among various packs and pockets, 3 watches, a small amount of coin, a woman's silver ring, 2 knives better than the ones the men currently carried, a compass, and a deed to a piece of land in Rio Arriba County with someone else's name on it. She set the deed aside and looked at the name on it. "Do you know this name?" she asked. "Cole?" He looked. He did not. She folded it carefully and put it with her letters. Decker, who had recovered some of his voice, said something threatening about what was going to happen when he got loose. Cole crouched in front of him. He said, "I paid $190 today. That money came from somewhere. It had no business going, and it is not coming back. I am not in a patient mood." He stood up. "So you are going to sit here and think about your choices, and in the morning, you are going to ride in whatever direction is away from me." He looked at the third man. "And you are going to write down where you got that deed, and who you got it from, because that piece of paper belongs to someone who did not give it to you." The third man wrote it down. People generally did what Cole asked. When he asked it in that particular tone, left the 3 men tied and took 2 of their horses as a practical measure, leaving the men enough rope slack to work free by dawn, which was more consideration than they had earned. They were back at Cole's camp before midnight. Nara sat by the rebuilt fire and read through her letters twice in the firelight. Then she folded them inside the medicine bundle and held the bundle in both hands for a moment with her eyes closed. Cole did not ask what she was doing. He understood it, the way you understand things that do not require explaining. Rufus was going to have questions in the morning when Cole showed up with 2 extra horses and a woman he had not left camp with. Rufus was also the sort of man who asked questions once, heard the answer, and then got back to work. Cole valued that. He lay down on his bedroll and looked at the stars coming in hard and clear above the cottonwoods. Nara said, from across the fire, "You did not have to do any of this." "No," Cole said. "Why did you?" He thought about it. He was not a man who gave answers before he had looked at them from a few angles. After a moment he said, "You did not beg." She was quiet. He said, "Everybody on that platform had a reason to beg, and two of them did. You made an offer instead." I respected that. She said nothing for a while then. "The offer still stands." Cole looked at the stars. The thing about the stars in New Mexico territory was that there were so many of them that they stopped feeling like decoration and started feeling like a fact of the universe. Cold and permanent, and without opinion. He said, "Let us get you to Pedro's post first, then we can figure out what comes after." She accepted this. The fire crackled. Figs shifted in the dark. Somewhere south of them, three men were working at ropes and reconsidering their recent decisions. Cole closed his eyes and did not sleep for a while, which was fine, because there was a lot to think about, and the night was long. They rode out at first light. Nara on the better of the two recovered horses, a steady gray that she had examined and approved with the thoroughness of a woman who had been judging horses since before she could reliably judge men. Rufus took one look at the situation and said, "2 extra horses." "Yes," Cole said. Rufus looked at Nara. Nara looked back at him with the same level measuring quality she brought to all observations. Rufus said, "I can manage the herd," Cole said. "I know you can." That was the whole conversation. They rode east into a morning that was still cool and tasted of cedar and distant rain. Nara set the pace, which was faster than comfortable and slower than reckless, which Cole respected. She knew the land in the eastern way, not like someone who had studied a map, but like someone who had walked it in different seasons and remembered what each mile cost. On the first afternoon, they crossed a stretch of high desert where the ground was cracked into plates, like something enormous had tried to push up from below and given up. Nara pointed to a line of darker rock to the north and said, "That ridge was called the Broken Shoulder by my grandfather's people. The Spanish had a different name. The settlers have a different name still." "What do you call it?" Cole asked. "The Broken Shoulder," she said. "Some names are right." They camped that night in a dry wash where the sandstone walls held the heat of the day after the sun dropped. Nara made a fire smaller and cleaner than any Cole had made in years. She cooked the jackrabbit he had shot in the late afternoon with the dried herbs from her medicine bundle, and the result was so much better than his usual trail cooking that Cole said so. She said, "My mother taught me." She cooked the way she did everything, like it mattered. Cole thought about his own mother who had died when he was 11 and who he still occasionally caught himself wanting to tell things to. He said, "Mine too, they ate. The stars came out. They were different stars this far east, or maybe the same stars from a different angle, which amounts to the same experience." Nara said, "Pedro will know what to do with the deed. He knows people in Rio Arriba County. He has a way of returning things to where they belong." "Good," Cole said. She said, "After Pedro, you go north to your land?" He said, "That is the plan." She said, "Is it a good piece of land?" He thought about it honestly. He said, "It was my father's. He picked it for water, not beauty, which is the smarter choice. There are 3 springs on 300 acres and good graze for cattle. The house needs work. The fence on the north side needs rebuilding before winter. There is more work than one person can reasonably do." She listened to all of this. She said, "You said you are not married." "No," she said. "Why not?" He looked at the fire. He said, "There was a woman in Las Cruces about 4 years back. Things went a particular way." He stopped there. She did not push on it. She said, "There was a man in my people's camp. We were going to be married in the spring. He died of a fever last winter," Cole said. "I am sorry," she said. "I was angry for a long time. Then I was just sad. Now I am mostly moving forward." He nodded. He understood that progression. The fire went low and they slept on opposite sides of it, which was practical, and woke at dawn to a sky that was turning from black to the particular deep blue that has no name in English, but that Cole had always thought of as the color of things about to begin. The second day brought trouble before noon. They had just crossed a dry riverbed when Nara put her hand up without speaking and stopped her horse. Cole stopped Fig and looked where she was not quite looking, which was the trick of it. You watch the edges of where a careful person was watching, not the center. 3 riders on the ridge to the south. Not moving, not Decker and his men, Nara said quietly. Different horses. She studied them. They have been following since this morning. Cole said, "Do they know we see them?" She said they will now. She was right. As if the act of being observed had communicated itself across the distance, all three riders moved at once, angling down from the ridge at a pace that was not a charge, but was not casual either. Said, "Can we reach that rock formation ahead before they close the gap?" Nara looked at the formation, a cluster of house-sized boulders maybe 3/4 of a mile north. She calculated. She said, "Yes." They rode. They reached the boulders with enough distance ahead of the riders to dismount and find positions before the three men came into the flat ground below. Cole took the higher rock with his rifle. Nara took a lower position where the sight lines were better for shorter range. She had one of the knives from Decker's camp. She had not asked Cole for a gun, and he had not assumed to offer one. The three riders stopped about 100 yards out. They were not the sort of men who came to a fight without looking at it first. The one in front called out, "We are looking for a woman." "Apache, seen her?" Cole said nothing. From above and behind rocks, silence is an answer. The rider tried again. "She is carrying letters that belong to a man in Santa Fe. We are hired to bring them back." Nara, from her position, said to Cole at a breath's volume, "The man in Santa Fe is the reason I was carrying the letters in the first place. He wants them back because they prove something he has done that he cannot afford to have proven." Cole absorbed this. He called down to the riders, "The woman you are looking for is not here." The lead rider said, "We tracked 2 sets of prints to this position." Cole said, "Tracking is not the same as finding." There was a pause while the riders considered their options, which were limited by geography. "And the fact that a rifleman above you in rocks is a significant disadvantage to work around." The lead rider said, "We will pay for the letters." Cole said, "They are not his letters to buy back." Another pause. The riders exchanged looks among themselves. Colt watched the hands of all three men the way you watch the hands of people who are trying to decide something. The lead rider made the wrong decision. He went for his gun. The other two read his signal and moved a half-second behind him. Cole shot the gun out of the lead rider's hand, which was both harder than it sounds and exactly as painful for the recipient as it appears. The man screamed, and the horse screamed, and the other two horses spooked sideways, which disrupted any plan the other two men had been forming. Cole levered and said, in a carrying voice, "Next one is not aimed at the hand." The three riders pulled their horses under control. The lead man was holding his right hand against his chest and making sounds that were not words. Cole said, "Ride north and keep riding." They rode north. Cole watched until they were out of rifle range and still going. Nara came up beside him. She looked at the retreating riders. She said, "You could have killed him." "I know," Cole said. She said, "Why did you not?" he said. "Because 3 graves take longer to dig than a warning shot, and I have somewhere to be." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Pedro's post is 1 day from here now. We will make it by tomorrow afternoon if nothing else finds us first." Cole looked at the horizon where the 3 riders had disappeared. He looked at the letters inside Nara's dress, which were proof of something a powerful man had done and could not undo. He thought about the deed in her medicine bundle with someone else's name on it. He thought about the 60 cattle moving north with Rufus, and the dead on his land, and the fence that needed rebuilding before winter, and the 3 springs on 300 acres. He thought about a woman who had stood on an auction block in a torn dress with her wrists raw and her chin up, and had made the only offer she had left to make, he said. "Then let us ride." They mounted and moved east into the afternoon light. 2 people who had started as a transaction and were becoming, with each mile, something that neither of them yet had a word for. The land opened ahead of them, wide and honest and full of difficulty, which is the kind of country that tells you the truth about who you are. Cole, Hardin, and Nara rode into it without flinching. Pedro's trading post sat at the junction of 2 trails that the maps called unnamed, but that everyone who used them knew by the descriptions travelers gave each other in careful detail. The post itself was 3 buildings and a corral, built from adobe and timber, and what appeared to be pure stubbornness, since nothing else could explain how it had stood this long in country that ate weaker structures for breakfast. Pedro was a wide man of about 50, with gray in his hair, and the particular stillness of someone who had seen a great deal and stopped being surprised by most of it. He came out of the main building when he heard the horses and stood on the porch, watching them approach. When he saw Nara, he said something in Apache that Cole could not follow. Nara answered, and the conversation went back and forth for 2 full minutes, with Pedro's face going through several changes that settled finally at something that was relief, with a layer of anger underneath it, at whatever had caused the need for relief. Then Pedro switched to English, apparently for Cole's benefit, he said. She says you paid to get her free and helped her get here. Cole said, yes. Pedro looked at him the way Pedro looked at most things, which was with a kind of detailed patience, he said. Come inside. The inside of the trading post was organized in the way that looks like chaos, until you look long enough to see the system underneath. Pedro cleared a table and Nara laid out the letters. Pedro read each one twice in silence. His face, during this reading, was the face of a man, confirming something he had already suspected, which is a different face from the face of someone learning something new, he said. Do you know what is in these? Nara said. I know what they concern, Pedro said. The man who sent riders after you is a land commissioner in Santa Fe. These letters document an arrangement he made with 3 settlers to falsify survey records in Rio Arriba County. 14 families have been paying taxes on land boundaries that were drawn wrong on purpose. The commissioner gets a share of the excess. Colo said. That is why there was a deed in Decker's camp. Pedro looked at him. What deed? Cole took it from Nara, who produced it from the medicine bundle. Pedro unfolded it and read the name and sat back in his chair, with the particular weight of a man adding new information to a structure he has already been building. He said, this is Miguel Carrasco's land. Miguel Carrasco died 2 years ago. His family has been in a dispute over the land ever since, Nara said. Decker's man told us where they got it. It is written on the back. Pedro turned the deed over and read what was written there, and said something short and expressive in Spanish. He said, I can get these to a man in Santa Fe, who is not owned by the commissioner. It will take time. It will cause trouble for certain people who have been comfortable for too long, Cole said. Will it cause trouble for Nara? Pedro looked at him, then at Nara, then at Cole again with slightly more interest than he had shown before. Nara said, Pedro, he is asking will I be safe? Pedro said, you will be safer once these letters are out of your hands and in the hands of someone who can act on them. The commissioner will lose interest in a woman who no longer has what he wants. He said to Cole, she will be safe, not today, maybe not next week, but soon. Cole nodded. Pedro stood and went to get food, which is what Pedro did. When important things had been settled, he fed people. While Pedro was in the back of the building, Nara sat across the table from Cole in the quiet of the trading post. Through the one window, the late afternoon light came in at a low angle and lit the dust in the air, and the surface of the table, and the side of her face. She said, you are 3 days behind your herd now. 4, he said. Maybe 4.5, she said. Rufus will manage. Rufus will manage, he agreed. She was quiet. Then she said, the offer I made you. On the block he met her eyes. She said, I made it because it was what I had. I do not regret making it, but I want you to know that I made it to survive, not because I do not think I deserve better. Cole said. I know that, she said. I am telling you because I want what comes next, to start from the right place. If anything comes next, he said. What would the right place look like? She considered this seriously, which he appreciated. She said, it would look like 2 people choosing each other. Not one person buying and one person being bought. Not one person rescuing and one person being rescued. Cole thought about the fence on the north side that needed rebuilding. He thought about the springs. 3 springs on 300 acres is a particular kind of luck that a man alone cannot fully make use of. He thought about a woman who read her letters by firelight with complete attention, and cooked rabbit with dried herbs, and kept her chin up in the worst circumstances, and could track a person following them across open desert before the person knew they had been seen. He said, I have 300 acres in the Rio Hondo foothills. The land is good. The house needs work. There is more work than one person can do, she said. You told me that before, he said. I am telling you again, because now I am telling it to you differently. She understood the difference. He saw it in the way she was still. He said, I am not asking for the thing you offered on the block. I am asking something that starts from scratch. No debt between us, no transaction. Just would you come north and see the land? She looked at him for a long time. He did not look away, and she did not look away, and the dust moved in the light between them, she said. I have to go back to my people's camp first. There are people who need to know I am alive. It may take a month, maybe 2, he said. The fence will still need building in 2 months, she said. And you will wait, he said. I will wait. Pedro came back with food and did not comment on whatever he had walked back into, which was a quality Cole was beginning to understand, was simply how Pedro moved through the world, present, observant, discreet. They ate. Pedro talked about the territory, about the commissioner, and what would happen when the letters found the right hands. About the Carrasco family and the land that should go back to them. About the slow and grinding way that justice worked in country that had been contested since before any of their grandparents were born. Nara listened and contributed and pushed back on 2 of Pedro's assumptions with evidence he accepted after consideration. Cole watched her do this and thought about the north fence and the springs and the long winters that were easier with 2 people than 1. After the meal, Pedro showed them where they could sleep. He gave Nara the room he kept for family. He gave Cole a cot in the trading room. Before he went to bed, he said to Cole, "That woman has been moving important things between people who cannot move them themselves for 3 years. She does it because she believes the territory belongs to everyone who lives in it honestly, not just to the ones who got here first, with enough money to make a deed." Cole said, "I figured it was something like that." Pedro said, "She is not a simple woman." Cole said, "I know." Pedro said, "Most men who have bought something think they own it." Cole said, "I did not buy her. I bought her off a block so someone worse than me could not." Pedro looked at him in the lantern light. He said, "Yes, that is what she told me." Then he went to bed. Cole lay on the cot in the dark of the trading room and listened to the night outside, the horses in the corral, something moving in the brush to the east, the wind coming down from the north. He thought about what it meant to wait for something worth waiting for. His father had waited 3 years to save enough to buy the land above the Rio Hondo. His father had said, "A man who cannot wait for a thing probably does not deserve it." His father had been right about most things and wrong about enough others that Cole took his wisdom with the appropriate amount of context. But that one, Cole thought, that one holds up. In 2 months, maybe less. A woman was going to come north from the San Pedro range. She would ride into the foothills above the Rio Hondo and look at 300 acres with 3 springs, and a house that needed work, and a north fence that needed rebuilding. And she was going to make a choice that was hers to make, freely, with nothing owed and nothing bought. And Cole Hartman was going to be there, working the land that was his father's and would be his, waiting the way. Wait for something that is not guaranteed, but is worth the possibility. He closed his eyes. Outside, the territory went on being vast and difficult and full of the kind of beauty that is hard to describe because it does not perform for anyone. It simply exists, like water finding its own level, like morning coming whether you are ready for it or not. 2 months. He could wait 2 months. He was already planning what he was going to do with the fence.